Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and on this episode I'll be speaking to author Andy Stanton. Andy's written a book called Benny the Blue Whale, a descent into story, language, and the madness of ChatGPT, which is available in print and also as an audiobook with ChatGPT voiced by Nish Kumar. As you'll hear from our talk, this doesn't mean he's typed a simple prompt and then printed the result. Rather, it's a fascinating look at language and a great lesson on what makes good writing by considering what ChatGPT can't do, as well as looking at what it can manage. The following clip is a sample from the intro of the book which details how Andy got sucked into this world.
My cousin Dave's a retired software engineer who dedicated 4 decades of his life to the industry. He's one of those people who probably sent their first email in 1982 or something, when only computer folks and the military knew about such things. As you may know, I usually write children's books. I'm best known for a series called Mr. Gum, which trades in wordplay, cartoonish surrealism, and convoluted, self-referential funnies. In other words, meta-humour. Dave knows my weaknesses. To bait his hook, he texted me a ChatGPT-generated screenplay, which mashed up the worlds of Breaking Bad and Mr. Gum. Then he'd asked the bot to remix and reframe the starting point in all sorts of amusing ways. A newspaper review praising the screenplay. A literary critique of the screenplay slamming it. Another critique from a rival publication, denouncing the first critique as a paid hit piece. 11th of the 12th, 2022, 7:38 p.m. Andy S. Ha, I guess I'm in. It took me a full 12 minutes to decide I wanted to ruin my life.
As well as the book, we discuss Andy's long-running podcast Ask the Nincompoops, as well as not reading your reviews and the difficulties of promotion in the social media age. I started my chat with Andy by asking him to give a quick introduction about himself and his work.
Hi everyone, I'm Andy Stanton. I am best known for being a children's author. I am the author of the beloved and anarchic children's book series Mr. Gum. I've written a bunch of picture books as well, a couple of other non-Mr. Gum middle grade children's books. I turned the Mr. Gum, one of the Mr. Gum books into a musical for the National Theatre in 2019, just before the world went crazy. That was good timing. And I don't think it was a causative thing. And what else? And yeah, I've sort of seen quite a lot of the industry over the years. I've been doing that since 2006 was my first published book. In recent times, I fell into the wormhole that is ChatGPT, the demon du jour, which is threatening all sorts of artistic and other livelihoods, along with its sibling AIs, and I wrote a book about ChatGPT called Benny the Blue Whale, a descent into story, language, and the madness of ChatGPT, which takes as its starting point a novel-length story I engineered with ChatGPT about Benny the Blue Whale, who is a blue whale with a tiny penis. So I fell into this story by asking it to tell me a story about a blue whale with a tiny penis, and it started telling me a story, because that's what ChatGPT does. And I kept with it because it was a natural experiment. World-changing technology meets world-class idiot, and I carried on until I got to the point where I thought, this is so interesting. To me, it seems to be revealing something about the creative process itself. I'm not arguing or advocating for ChatGPT being a great or even a good author, but the way I interfaced with it was very interesting. It seemed like an exploded diagram of the creative process. So I wrote a book about that. So it's a story, and around it it's annotated. It's a nested story with me talking about creativity around it. There you go. How will that do? 1 million words. I am ChatGPT. Blah 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 blah.
It's going to be interesting. I listened to you. Is it the Failing Writers podcast?
Yes, yeah, they're good podcast.
That was really interesting. Kind of chat on that. So I mean, I'll push people towards that for the creative side of things, and
sure.
The descent into madness. I mean, it'd be good to talk about some of that here, but I'll push people to that as well. It was really, really interesting. And as a writer, what made you kind of get into and be interested in ChatGPT?
Oh well, it does something that I'm very interested in, right? It intersects with a lot of people's interests, and the way it intersected for me was that this is a machine that has scraped such a vast amount of textual data created by humans that it has analysed and found patterns in the way that words are connected and resonate with each other and what might be likely to come next. So it's kind of got a madness of crowds a wisdom of crowds. No, see, I can't get away from madness when I talk about ChatGPT. It's got a kind of wisdom of crowds, knowledge about, what connections humans make when they use language. And as a writer, I'm particularly interested in wordplay, the things I write, and in sort of finding resonances and rhymes and rhythms and bounces and little echoes. I'm much more about style than I am about story at some level. So I'm constantly going around turning words over in my mind and thinking about how things connect and how we can put things together in new and unusual ways. That's what I like. And why does one made up simile feel correct? Like in my books, I sort of say, in my kids' books, I've used silent as an avocado or as friendly as toast. And these aren't real acknowledged phrases, but they feel correct. It's like when Salvador Dali takes the lobster and puts it as the receiver of the old-fashioned Bakelite telephone. And you go, well, okay, I can see the visual rhyme of the lobster shell on the old telephone, but also there seems to be a deeper resonance, a deeper connection. Anyway, ChatGPT burlesques the kind of things I'm interested in, so I fell into this relationship with it. I suppose it was a perfect enzyme, and I was the perfect catalyst for one brand of its dark magic.
You started playing around with it. At what point did you think, there's a book in this, or I want to write a book on this?
One of the things that really worried me was that people would think, oh, here's an opportunist little so-and-so. he can't be bothered to write the books anymore, so he's found the machine that does it. Nothing could be further from the truth. I can't stand easy peasy art of any sort, or I want to see toil and pain and blood and sweat. I think if you didn't hurt yourself trying, you didn't try hard enough, right? So I naturally fell into playing with ChatGPT. When I got fascinated enough to start pursuing it after my own heart, which was to see, well, let's see what happens if it's a novel. Towards the end of writing the quote-unquote novel, I started to think, this is so interesting. I want to tell the world about the way I see this machine in relation to what I do. So it was probably about a month into playing with ChatGPT that I thought, I conceived the notion of a book within a book.
And that, because it's not a case of you said, put in a prompt, write a 30,000 word piece on a certain thing. It's a lot more iterative. And like you said, it kind of, I think you said another thing, it kind of folds in on itself. It's very meta. It's not just a straight process.
Well, yeah. Well, firstly, if you've played with ChatGPT, you'll know that it won't give you 30,000 words off one prompt. I mean, there's no reason it can't, but it couldn't do if they reprogrammed it. But it will give you a short burst of stuff. But then what's so interesting about it is that you can then keep the context going and say, oh, tell me more about that. Or, oh, did that, did that happen because he had problems with his mother or whatever? And it will add more content. So you can fall into a collaborative improvisation with it. I'd seen a lot of people doing short form monkey tricks with it, which is what everyone does when they start playing with it. Me too. And then it was just a natural progression for me to see what it was like as a recontextualizing machine over the long haul.
It's not, like you said, it's not an easy thing.
No, it's not that it's not easy. The pain comes in writing the book about the story. Generating a story with that thing was confounding and hilarious and interesting, but it wasn't painful like writing. I think I used my storytelling instincts and experience to get somewhere that was unique to me, just as if you did something over the long haul, you'd get somewhere that was unique with you. And for me, my obsessions run to reality versus fiction. And that's what the story of Benny the Blue Whale itself ultimately becomes. It becomes very, very metafictional. And at some point, I have a lot of the characters in the book start to write AI novels of their own with fictional AIs. There's one called Penelope 2.0, and there's another one called Gigi. So there's fictional characters within the fictional reality of my world with ChatGPT, and then it dives down again. And then so Benny starts writing a book with an AI, and then one of Benny's characters in his novel starts writing a book with an AI, and I start to lose my mind around that point. During the actual creative process with ChatGPT itself, I thought, oh, this is magic. I'm actually, I half believed that I was delving down to a new substrata of reality because it's so convincing that something magic's going on. But, when I came out of the dream, I was able to analyze it a lot more clearly. But again, take the AI out of the scenario. Just remove it algebraically from the equation. And this is what all creation is anyway. You have to be quite mad to believe or half believe that the fiction you're making, you have to believe that it's real at some level. Otherwise, you can't get to the end of it. So, this is why people do go mad making artworks of any sort. Long before AIs came along, the AI was just another kind of chaos engine to reflect back my own chaos engine. I guess it's all about me at the end of the day, and that's what AIs show us, I think.
How different was it? Because if you're writing a normal book, to some extent, even if things aren't fully formed, probably everything is already in your head.
Not at all. No. No, I mean, there's, writers write in, show me 100 writers and I'll show you 100 MOs, workflows. I believe I've read somewhere that Kurt Vonnegut, who I talk about in Benny as well, I talk about a lot of other creative processes and reference a lot of other literature and stuff in my own examination of it in a desperate attempt to make it more highbrow. No, I mean, this is what, what I think about. But Kurt Vonnegut, I believe, used to write very strangely. He would, let's say he was on page 78, he would write 78, and if it wasn't completely how he wanted it, he would screw it up, toss it in the waste paper bin, and rewrite 78. Nope, not quite right. Chuck it away again. 20th page 78, great, that's the one, then move on. I've never heard of anyone else writing like that. There are other writers who have everything plotted before they begin, more or less. There are other writers, Stephen King, I believe, is one of them, just sort of starts out with the opening conceit and improvises. I fall somewhere between the two. I usually, before I can write any book, I usually have the start, the engine of the story, maybe the kindling wood, the thing that's going to set the story in motion. What does the character want? What are they trying to stop? And I have a very rough ending in mind, and I have a suspicion that I can put enough twists and turns in the middle, but it changes a lot as I go along. And by the time I've got to the ending of any given story I'm working on, a much better one has usually occurred from some of the little accidents and details that have come in along the way. They will inform a better ending. But I'm quite improvisational.
It's interesting to talk about kind of happy accidents. I kind of use ChatGPT, my day jobs in analytics. If you want to program something, so you say, right, I want to get this data from here, I want to manipulate it like this, I want to pop out a chart at the end. And, most of the time it's fine. But sometimes it comes up with functions that don't exist, which is a pain if you're trying to write something that has to form a specific syntax, otherwise it doesn't work. But within fiction, obviously, that's a benefit rather than a hindrance, I guess.
A benefit. Yes, that is. That was one of the things I was interested in again, which is I've spent my life kind of reverse engineering my understanding of reality from fiction and fiction. And ChatGPT. There are lots of people like yourself using it in quote unquote the real world with quote unquote real things, and you find out very quickly that unless you are, you have to shepherd it very, very carefully, right, and fact check everything it's telling you because it sounds very authoritative, but it's constantly hallucinating and making up stuff to fill in the gaps. So, as in the world of fact and data, it's a very dangerous machine. Fiction is neither truth nor falsehood. It's a kind of semi-permeable fault line in between the two, and that's where I operate. So, to me, again, that's one of that. I had no doubt when ChatGPT came along that it was anything other than a machine that had been tailor-made for me. So I fell into, I forget the other 100 million people using it. I'm sort of sounding tongue-in-cheek arrogant. I'm not being arrogant. I'm saying that it came along and it seduced me. And my understanding of it was, oh, here's the machine that shows me my own obsession.
Yeah.
And it was only later, again, after working with Benny, that I thought about all the ramifications of all the hallucinations for people who are working with it at a factual level where you have to be so, so careful.
Just started listening to the audiobook. You kind of talk about calling the whale Benny and kind of thinking about, well, what that meant to you and all those kind of things. And it's kind of interesting that, you've it's just come up with that partly random, partly because you think it might be alliterative, but then you put all those feelings onto it that maybe the machine doesn't necessarily have.
Yeah, right, that's right. So I say, tell me a story about a blue whale with a tiny penis, literally not knowing this will affect the next X months of my life, possibly the rest of my life. What have I done to my brain? But I say, tell me a story about a blue whale with a tiny penis. It goes, oh, sure, there was a blue whale called Benny. I happen to love the name. That, to me, is an analogue of just falling in love with an idea that occurred to you anyway. You don't know why one idea is going to grab your attention and the next won't. Now, if it had said, Brendan the blue whale, maybe. I have nothing against the name Brendan, but I know for a fact that I wouldn't have found it. It wouldn't have appealed to. That wouldn't have been the idea I'd have gone with, and I would have just gone, oh well, I'm going to bed now. Woken up the next morning, typed into ChatGPT, tell me about smelly animals, names for smelly animals, and just gone back to monkey tricks. It just. The point is that it happened to generate something that tickled my fantasy. And then as a human, I assign importance to that and go, oh yes, let me hear more about this. Every time the computer comes up with something I like, it's more grist to my mill, and I go, oh, let's concentrate on that. I didn't realise that was going to be a plot point. So we guide each other. And of course, this thing has no intent. We're a little way off from AGI or ASI, is that the next one? Artificial superintelligence, where we're basically at the singularity and we're complete, there's no need for humans anymore. We're a way off from actual artificial general intelligence, which implies something akin to the human brain, with emotional intent and a simulacrum of all that. So at this point, the AIs that people like you and I are playing with, they don't actually have intent. We are the ones spitting back, bouncing back our own predilections and preferences and going, oh gosh, yes, tell me more about that character. And then it becomes, very quickly, you forget who's prompting what, and you sort of think, wow, this machine's magic. It knows all the stuff I like. No, we know all the stuff we like. But again, to me, that's very interesting in how we create anything. Every time I sit down without a computer, or without an AI in the middle of it, in between me and my story, and think about what I like, I'm kind of doing a little echolocation on my own internal databanks, right?
Mm. When you kind of put this together, I mean, what's the kind of hit rate? Because you're saying, it takes a matter of months to put it together. It's not a quick thing. Are you kind of almost sentence by sentence or paragraph by paragraph, and then you tweak it until that paragraph works and you move on? Or
no, you can't do that with ChatGPT, right? You can't really do the Kurt Vonnegut way of writing, right? You can't edit. You have to do it on the fly, because you can. It's hard to get into in the abstract without sort of going through it together and boring your listeners to bits. But one of the many interesting things to me is that I had to rescind control and let the computer will spit out loads of shit, as we all know, right? And it will do it in beautifully formed, but kind of essentially quite drab and dull and bland prose. But to me, that's kind of funny anyway. There's a kind of ugly beauty in rubbishness, like the way that, for instance, South Park is a brilliant piece of art, but it looks intentionally quote unquote ugly. And it's very hard to make something as designed and done with forethought and invention and intent. It's very hard to make something look as basic as that. They've made it look like children's craft paper. That's what South Park looks like, but it's a very chosen aesthetic. ChatGPT happens to have this very glitchy, blocky, kind of bumpy, quite bland, corporate-ish writing aesthetic. I find that funny over the long haul. It's repetitions, it's word redundancies, it's cliches, it's occasional really, really getting it wrong, but it's frequent erosions of meaning, which are very hard to trace. It's like cat herding.
Yeah.
To me, that is part of the fabric of writing with ChatGPT as it stands at the moment, and that's funny in itself. But the hit rate is that every now and again, I'm the one kind of steering it further into a world of my liking, and it starts to kind of quote unquote understand what I'm after. The longer I go with it. So it kind of makes an echolocation of me as well. And it starts to sound to me kind of like a Frankenstein's monster version of my own writing and obsessions. But every so often, because of the way these things work, because of what they call a stochastic randomization, the stochastic process, is that the, sorry, not stochastic randomization. It works stochastically, which is a type of randomization where it will throw new stuff into the mix that you weren't expecting. Every so often, that results in what I call a brilliancy. Taking that phrase from chess brilliancies, which is a move that a chess computer will find hard to make, even though it's analysing hundreds of millions of moves a second. Even the world's greatest chess computers find it hard to find a brilliancy. Well, to my mind, every so often, ChatGPT does throw up a brilliancy, and I go, my God, I want to know more about that plot point. Would I have come up with that with myself? I don't know. But it doesn't matter because it did. This is, to me, that's a truly collaborative process, even though I'm collaborating with let's say an unthinking fucking idiot.
So when you're putting this book together and you're trying to get it published, how do you pitch that to a publisher? How do you say, I'm writing this with ChatGPT?
Well, great question. I mean, first thing is I pitched it to my agent and I said, Eve, my agent, Eve White, hi Eve, I want to tell you about something. Can we have a Zoom call? Sure, okay. And then I shared my screen and I said, Eve, have you heard of ChatGPT? And she hadn't at that point. And she said no. And I said, okay. And I typed in, I said, look at this screen. Tell me a story about a children's author who pitches his agent about a book written with artificial... And her jaw dropped. And I said, what if I told you I have thousands and thousands of words ready to go of the story I have made about this, and I want to annotate it and turn it into an exploded diagram of a novel? And she went, I think we should start contacting publishers. I said, I agree. So then what we did was, what any agent does next is to send the package out to X number of publishers. In this case, we sent a version of the Benny story, and we sent it out with I think a 4-page pitch document, really, I guess you'd call it, where I said, everyone's doing this, that, or the other with AIs. They're extremely frightening. They're extremely unknown. This is how I interacted with it. I think for me, it's an investigation into fiction. I would like to make this an annotated novel. I would like to use this as a starting point to explore themes of creativity and human agency and what AIs are doing to us. We sent it out to about 15 publishers. Most of them, or all of them but one, there's a spoiler, turned us down for various reasons, which is just as it often is. You only need one to say yes. But a lot of the reasons that people turned us down, some people just didn't like it, which is always a possibility. Some people were very, very, very skeptical about the whole AI angle because it's very threatening to a lot of industries, and certainly it's threatening to the book publishing industry.
Yeah.
Other people didn't like the fact that there was a tiny penis involved. There were loads of reasons to hate this book, and again, to me, it was a mark. It was a mark of just how unplanned it was. That if I were trying to sell this thing in cold blood, I wouldn't make it a story about a blue whale with a tiny penis. That's just asking for trouble. It's how are you going to sell that? So that kind of shows my integrity. No, this was just the idea I started with. That's how we pitched it. Like the AI story plus 4 pages of. Honestly, I will be quoting Vonnegut and Orwell,
With that, like you said, the possible problems of it, of the story being about a tiny penis.
Yes.
But both that and also the whole possible complexity of ChatGPT. If you're on, let's say, BBC Three Counties Radio and they say, tell me about the book, do you ignore the penis bit? And how far do you go into large language models and the rest of it?
Well, yeah, no, you don't ignore it. But I was on, I was talking on Queensland, it was Melbourne ABC Radio in Australia recently. And I said, they were asking me about the book, of course. And I said, well, it's about a blue whale with and I said, what word would you like me to use? Can I use the medical word? They said yes. So I said penis. On another show, I've said it's all about getting an ear for it. On another show, I said a blue whale with a tiny, shall we say, appendage at this point time in the morning. The penis or the appendage or the member is not the point of the exercise. It's only there to illustrate that we can start with any idea and explore it from there. But yeah, that I think that's just an exercise in PR wherever you go. You read the room, and you don't, you're only as bawdy as the room allows. I don't want to be bawdy. I'm not interested in it. I just, but penis isn't a bad word, but I accept that it may not be, good listening fodder for Radio 2 listeners at 11 a.m. So.
Yeah, and in terms of the technical side, how far into large language models and things like that did you discuss? And I mean, like you said your agent didn't particularly know about it at the time. Obviously, things progress so fast in that now.
Well, I was a layperson, right? And I suppose I still am, but a layperson with a bit of experience. ChatGPT hit me from like a bolt from the blue, and it picked up 100 million users worldwide within 2 months, and Facebook took 4 years to do that. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say those 100 million people using it were mostly like me. People who just found the magical user experience, who had never considered AI except, that's something that's going to be with us in some form I don't understand in 20 years. And suddenly here it was on our doorstep. In the book, I realized quite quickly that given the time constraints and my own particular interests in using this as an intersection to intersect with my own obsessions, I'm not going. This isn't supposed to be a book that goes deep into the technology, but it raises a lot of questions about the technology, and I have, some understanding that I gleaned along the way in writing the book and in interrogating and learning about how LLMs work. My understanding of it is constantly evolving, and I'm quite lazy as a factual. At the factual level, as I said, I reverse engineered most of my learning and understanding of the world through fiction. For the first time, I suddenly turned myself into a quasi-journalist here, amongst other things. But it's not a deeply technical book. But there are plenty of deeply technical books and articles online for those who want to read that, right? And of course, I've increasingly sort of tried to digest as many of them as possible. But to spit all that stuff out on the fly, unless you know what you're talking about, is just asking for trouble, because you are then yourself ChatGPT just hallucinating and getting things wrong. I tried to make it as non-technical as possible whilst giving the shape of how the LLM works.
I couldn't really resist. Obviously, I don't know whether people have done this to you, but I put into ChatGPT what questions I should kind of ask you. And so I said,
nuts.
Kind of talk about, it's interesting. I said, give me 3 questions about creativity I should ask Mr. Gum author Andy Stanton. And he goes, blah, blah, blah. He goes, like, one about inspiration and creativity. Can you share some insights in your creative process? Then there's one about balancing structure and creativity. It says, your books often feature a delightful mix of structured storytelling and wild, unpredictable elements. And so it's kind of interesting that it kind of, I think where we are at the moment is, on any kind of artificial intelligence, you get that 6 out of 10 on everything. They're perfectly sensible questions, but they are effectively, how do you get your crazy ideas?
Yeah, well, what's so interesting is they're very broad mashups as well, right? Like you could have, as I'm sure you could have carried on prompting to try and make it a little more specific, or kind of a little more edgy than that. But actually, in the end, you know what questions you want to ask me, really. So you're only asking ChatGPT to echo back something that, if you direct it that much, you're really directing it to ask me what you want to ask me anyway. The other thing is that, it's quite funny, again, in the very Frankensteinish monsters way, to see it putting those two ideas together. Like if you'd said, I'm going to interview a guy who's written a cookery book about salads, can you what should I ask that guy about where he gets his inspiration? And it would have said, wouldn't it? It would have said, you write so convincingly about your delicious sounding food. Is that, it would have just said that and then said, where do you get your ideas? And it's not a very good mashup. It's just 2 sentences that answer the brief. So I have. So what's the question? I have freewheeling ideas and imagination, and how do I balance that with structure? Well, that's the question. It's not a bad question. It's just very ChatGPT. But it's actually not a bad question at all. If you are writing very surreal, anarchic stuff like I do with bizarro humor and larger than life characters, it's particularly easy to just keep being inventive, I think, and just go, the man fell over in some trifle and a cat flew out of his ear, and then the cat started barking instead of meowing, and a fire engine heard the barks and came out and tried to put out the cat with a hose, and you can do that ad infinitum, right?
Yeah.
I can, but how do you balance it with structure? Well, what you do is you have to shape, you have to use that bizarre humor as just one element of your work and shape it with all the things that any story needs, like emotional stakes and emotional reality. So that's one thing that ChatGPT doesn't do yet. It doesn't understand emotional affect. So everything is very surface. So I would say the biggest failing of the Benny story in a lit crit way, the Benny story itself, is that where's the emotion? It's very kinetic and it's fast moving, but without any depth. But the depth comes from my input, I think. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I know it's interesting on that, kind of reading some of the reviews, the good reviews, but like you said, they say about the story bit, kind of, it doesn't work necessarily perfectly, but you'd almost wouldn't want that, because if someone was saying this is the best book ever written, that kind of puts every author out of a job.
Yeah, I wasn't. I'm not going, oh, brilliant, here's the War and Peace machine. Although, at points I do think, when I was under its spell, I thought, my God, I found a pocket Vonnegut. That's what I thought. But no, there's no such thing as a pocket Vonnegut. There's no such thing as a pocket Thomas Pynchon. This isn't what it's not the point of the book to say, look, everybody, me and this machine made the best novel ever, because it's not even in the top 100 million. I like the story because it's so silly and it reflects my obsessions. Its failings are what show us something as well about writing, as much as its successes.
And so, like I said, listening to the audiobooks, you got that as well as the book. I mean, because this isn't a straight novel that you have an author read, there's lots of, in the book, footnotes, asides in the audiobook. I mean, how did you find the two, and how do you think the two work?
So in the book, the story takes place on the left-hand pages, and then beneath the story, going across the book, are my footnotes, and on the right-hand pages there are extra marginalia from me making little observation or wisecracks or saying, oh my God, look at it now, it's gone crazy, or whatever, So the book is it's very schematic and very unusually formatted. How do you do that as the audiobook? So, well, firstly, we got somebody to play me. That was me. That seemed useful. And then we got someone else to play ChatGPT, who was the amazing Nish Kumar. And then I had to spend another 3 or 4 weeks with the lovely lady from the audiobook company, Georgia. And we went back and forth deciding where the footnotes and marginalia would fall chronologically as you listen. So we had to do a bit of reordering, and sometimes we had to break up a footnote here and there and chuck it in at slightly different places. So this book's been, I said at the start that unless you hurt yourself, you didn't try hard enough. This book has hurt me more than any other book I've ever done. And to me, it only makes sense if you hurt yourself. So I took the machine that does all the work for you and turned it into the hardest work of my life, and that makes me laugh. Haven't listened to how it's all been stitched together. I hope it's followable.
I mean, it's interesting kind of choosing Nish for it. I mean, did you consider using an artificial voice, or, there's so many now?
No, not at all, because the artificial voice has... No, it has to be engaging. I want to present ChatGPT as a character in its own right, and to illustrate the human, our reactions to ChatGPT, to cartoonize ChatGPT, and to kind of present it as a character who's very, very fractured and might go from one register one moment to another register the next, and suddenly for no reason at all, suddenly go, oh. No, I'm afraid that's an inappropriate response. And I wanted to have a human interpret what is mad about ChatGPT and give us a performance that shows increasingly AIs are being used or will be used to read audiobooks, because they are dialing in the simulation of natural emotion and speech, natural sounding emotion and speech, into AI readings. So you're going to have human texts read by machine. So it's very amusing to me that we have a machine text being read by a human as part of this audiobook, right? I like that I take the technology and do everything backwards with it, really, and explore it from that angle. So it makes me laugh, and also Nish is very funny.
Yes, you're not going to get that level, certainly not yet. I mean, it's certainly coming. There's sites where, for example, you can have Snoop Dogg's voice. So, you can put some text in and it'll read it in, and there's enough of Nish out there that you could sample it, and you're certainly not going to get 100%, but, it's only going to get closer and closer.
Absolutely, and I believe that we could sample any 20 seconds of this discussion of either you or I, and generate a broad version of ourselves, which could then be tweaked, and words can be put in our digital mouths, which really fucking sucks. Did I just say fucking sucks, or was that an AI that made me say that? It's this stuff is fascinating and frightening. One of the things, again, that interests me about AIs is the idea that they are reducing all modalities to language. So music can be translated into an understandable language by AIs, as can perhaps whale song, to stay on topic, which I think is being done at the moment. As can the human brain can be mapped and identified, and what neurons are firing where, right? As can visual information is translatable into language, of course. My question is, how can we translate language into language? What does that mean? Whose language is this, right? And why does it seem to be the base level of currency in the universe, and are we going to, if I go too far down that line of chop logic in my own head, I start thinking, well, maybe there, it is all about the universal in the beginning was the sound, Language is a network of meanings and associations and resonances and values playing off each other. Language is the language. So I think my own career, what I trade in is words, and that's language, and it's different to music or visual arts. And I think music and visual arts are falling much faster.
Yeah.
To the rendering of synthetic products that AI can achieve, whereas language is a harder bastion to crack.
Yes, I think that's the thing. Maybe a sentence is one thing. It kind of grows. To make a sentence that makes sense, fine. Paragraph maybe, but then once you get all the way to a book, you've got so many things that can go wrong that you end up with nonsense if you have to do it in one go.
And also, how do you decide when to deploy the telling detail, the punch in the solar plexus of a really emotional moment in text, right? That's really difficult. Whereas in music, for example, a minor chord will, to Western ears at least, sound sad, right? And there are some maths behind music which I don't think apply to the writing of a novel, say. I'm not saying music's easy, of course it's not. But I think it's easier to manifest emotional affect with, again, if you play a piano, if you play a note of music, the timbre of the instrument you're playing on has an emotional effect, and the attack, whether you're playing hard or soft, whether you're playing staccato or legato. Whereas the word tree is just the word tree, whether I write it, you write it, or ChatGPT writes it. It's much harder to build up from these kind of quote-unquote neutral building blocks. I know words aren't neutral, but compared to, something they're unadorned building blocks, whereas a musical note or a brush stroke in a visual art is that can be rendered in many different ways.
Yeah. On the more financial side of things, because I think one of the things I said to you was, not for this book itself, but I'm interested in kind of how Spotify seem to be hoovering up absolutely everything and are now offering audiobooks. And I think I mentioned to you that the Mr. Gum books, I think there's 9 in the series, so they're in a package, and that's available as an audiobook to listen for no extra cost as a premium customer. So
no, I'm happy with it.
I mean, this is the thing. It's I've spoken to a couple of authors where they go, "What? I didn't know about this." And
I did not know about it till you mentioned it.
Yeah, it seems whether they're going to go down the same kind of route that kind of squeezes musicians to squeeze authors, or whether it's a bit more generous.
Well, look, I don't know comparatively, right? Because I've been swimming in these waters for some nearly 20 years now, and about 17 years, and I have my own sort of set of parameters and expectations and triumphs and disappointments and philosophical attitude towards all these things. I've done very well comparatively out of the Mr. Gum books. Those have bought me a career and a life. I'm by no means comfortable, but I'm more comfortable than if I hadn't built myself a career. Well, I'm comfortable. I'm not well off, right? But I'm very happy with what those books have given me, and to me that seems like a very good reward for what I did, right? And I'm very grateful. Along the way, there've been times when I was hotter than notter, and the books were doing well at the time, and I got a few instances where my publishers at the time, Egmont, actually bought advertising on the tube and stuff, and I'm very adolescent about advertising. I'm a bit Bill Hicks. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to put a dollar sign on fucking everything. I am like that. That's just my ethos, right? No shade to, I consider myself slightly outside of it, which is bullshit, because I'm constantly opening up emails that tell me there's 30% off something. But I flatter myself, as do a lot of people, that I'm a bit inured from all this. But no, I don't like quote unquote advertising, except when it's advertising something that I'm trying to sell. So yeah, then it's great. But there are I'm very I cock a snoot at it, really, but it's the way of the world. There've been times when I've had more marketing put my way than I do now, by a long shot. Marketing's very, very thin on the ground for most authors, especially in today's climate, where the front list and a very few titles are getting most of the budget. The rest of the books in any publisher's list are pretty much put out to sink or swim. And if by chance they do pick up more traction than the next guy, then they'll be brought into that magic circle over time. But it has to be kind of by surprise. It's a surprise hit, a sleeper hit, word of mouth, or maybe an author who goes out and does a lot of that marketing themselves online, which I'm sure you want to talk about. But things like Mr. Gunn being available on Spotify for quote unquote free. Well, firstly, there's probably still some residual that I'm getting from that at some level. Yeah. And I don't know, because I don't read my royalty statements I don't read them very granularly, but I trust in my agent, and I trust in the contracts we signed at the time. And I trust that at this point in time, Egmont, now Farshawe, have made that deal with Spotify because it's it's useful to our property to be giving it away for free at this point in time. So I don't doubt the wisdom of it, but it's not the metrics that I follow.
Yeah, well, I had a quick look at the Audible top 10 yesterday, and 8 of them are available for free. So even like Richard Osman's is like the most,
of course, yeah,
is the biggest selling, but you can get it free. And it's all about within music, because a lot of Spotify was kind of quite largely owned by the record companies, that they're quite happy to kind of move the money that way, and eventually the musician kind of gets screwed over, and the big question is going to be is this a more equitable thing, or is the same going to happen to audiobooks?
I mean, it's a good question, right? At this stage in time, I'm going, I'm really happy that it's on Spotify. But you're right, it might be the thin edge of the wedge, thin end of the wedge. The short answer is I don't know. I didn't even know they were on Spotify till you told me. But I suspect, I suppose my worldview, I expect to get stooped as a creator. I just expect it. It's not very good that I roll over and play ball, but I don't have the time or resources or interest or talent to fight that system or to make that my priority. To me, the most important thing is just doing the work. I would rather spend more time personally wrestling with artistic demons to get out whatever I can get out than to say, well, I'll take 30% of my creative time and put that into fighting for my own rights. It's not because I'm noble or anything. It's just that my resources are almost entirely about trying to make myself work. Someone like Tom Gray, late of Gomez, and I'm sure you know about what Tom's doing against Spotify, right?
Yes.
He's got a petition and a movement called, what's it called? For the record, off the record?
Broken record.
No, broken record, that's right. Broken record, because the idea being he's a broken record about this subject, and that the record industry is broken. It's a very good name, which it then took me a while to get from my glitchy databanks. But so Tom's an amazing guy, and he is somewhere in his career where he's decided that, he's now become really a spokesperson for a cause representing other artists, and I admire that tremendously. I'm just not an activist. I'm a lonely, self-obsessed, crabbed, hermetic little golem of a fucking creature, who just sits around. I'm happy if I write something that makes me happy, and then I put it out into the world, and if I'm lucky, other people pick it up and do let me have a shot at gold. It doesn't mean that once it's out there, I'm just like, oh great, that's that done. I do get exercised by, is the book doing well? Is it not doing it well? Can we be doing more? I want PR, I'm talking to you, aren't I? It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk. I like to talk. I like to think about all of these things and exercise my vocal cords, and hopefully some people like to hear me doing that. But I want to be able to live, and I do. But to me, it's also like if I've worked really hard on a project and I've done my end of the bargain, and I think it's good enough, and other people have backed me, I want their various departments to be working hard enough to give my book or books a chance.
Okay. So you kind of see, not in a nice way, but the publicity, that's just not for you. You'd rather just someone else get on and do it. You kind of want to be more focused. We all have to play the game to some extent now, right? And I don't like it, but that's life. When I started out as a writer in 2000, and when Mr. Gum came out in 2006, for some years, the book world had already been moving towards being quite performative. It was a virtue if you were good on stage as well as on the page. Yeah. And I'm great on stage. I'm not going to lie. I'm tremendous. I'm just really good. And I was very lucky. I had books that people wanted to read, and I gave good event, I still do. And you can hire me by going on. And I'm sure you can figure that out if you want me to come and talk at your school or book event, guys. But yeah, no, I love doing events. But I didn't quite realise at the time how lucky I was that I naturally had that string to my bow as well. There are other authors who might be terrific authors, who are terrific authors, and who just don't like doing events, aren't good at events, or both. And that's to their detriment. Hopefully the books still make it through, but the industry had demanded by that time, when I became an author, that if you had that string to your bow, it was going to help. Now we've moved on again. And now, for the first time since I became an author, it's increasingly dependent on something that I don't like doing, which is self-promotion. There is a massive quantitative difference and qualitative difference to me between appearing on stage and entertaining people for an hour and incidentally talking about and selling your books, and going on Twitter, going on Insta, going on TikTok, God forbid, and pushing stuff and being your own cheerleader. So I now find myself an author who hasn't got all the strings, whereas when I started, I had the page and the stage. Sure. Well, I don't have I still have those. I don't have the self-promotional string, though. Not very well at all. I'm embarrassed. I don't like asking for things. I don't like saying, hey, I'm great. I'm having to do it a little bit at the moment, but I know it's really hard. Everyone has to wear like 20 caps right now. I mean, musicians, artists, authors, it's very, very hard for everybody. Yeah. So I'm finding myself like yesterday's man in that world. When you do it, though, are you disciplined to say, right, Tuesday between 3 and 5, that's social media time, and I'll bundle stuff up and you'll have it already, or it'll just hang over you and now and again you'll push something out? It's more now and again, and I think, and I try and play it by ear, and it's a kind of instinctive algorithm, and it's moderated by my own shame and despondency about having to do this stuff. I don't like being the broken record for Andy Stanton. I think it's great being the broken record for associated artists in the music industry. That's worth being a broken record for. I don't think it's worth being a broken record for me. How dare I? But I have to live. I have to try and interact with this a bit. So, for instance, right? I don't even read any reviews because I'm very thin-skinned, and I just don't want it. It's not just being thin-skinned. Even the good ones, I don't want them in my data bank because they might make me second guess myself where I go next. But I hear stuff, and I hear stuff's come through, and you just said, oh, there's been some nice reviews, and I've heard that. And because my agent, she knows that I don't want to read this stuff, she said, oh, look, the Sunday Times gave you a really great review. I know you don't want to know, but it's really great. And here's the graphic, and look at the graphic and look at the headline. So, of course, I tweeted that and I said, oh, brilliant review in the Sunday Times. I didn't read it, but I when it comes to promotional stuff, and when it comes to being in the machine of it, the promotional machine, I'm kind of like a kid watching Doctor Who behind the sofa through, my hands in front of my. I want to see it, and I want not to. Please don't tell me, please. But I don't want to just let it. I don't want to abandon the book. I want to do as much as I can, but I can't. I can't just say. I'm not going to sit around making assets and sticking videos together by and large and making little graphic. I just don't want to do it. Yeah, it's kind of hard as well. Is that what you see you doing is obviously completely different to what other people see. So you might do 500 things, and some people will see 100 of them, some people will see 2, and so in your head you go, Jesus, I'm talking about myself all the bloody time. Yeah, it must be really annoying. But in fact, someone might have only seen you once or twice, and that's the thing. Well, don't tell me that, or I'll start peppering it. No, you're right. We get very flawed feedback from
from social media, obviously, right? And from everything we do, we think, again, this is similar to having a book out as well. You think it's the most important thing in the world. The world doesn't care. But if you stop to think about the world not caring, you'd never do any creative work, because if you really realized how small you were most of the time, you wouldn't even do it. I think you don't do it for success, but if you think about all the other things you could be doing in life and all the burning issues out there, why make anything? You have to have some sort of inflated, warped view of yourself to do anything creative. I think it's not an arrogance. It's just it can be, but it's not necessarily an arrogance. It's just a way to fool yourself into thinking that you need to pursue these obsessional thoughts. And then on social, you're right, you sort of go, oh, that one got two likes, it's rubbish, or that one got 1,000 likes, I'll do more of that. But you never know what you're getting back. There's industries around this and to help you market yourself and stuff. And I'm quite old-fashioned. It says the guy who just wrote the book with an artificial intelligence. But again, I poured myself into that AI and came back with a reflection of me. I did it in a way that is bumpy and old-fashioned, like a comfortable old armchair, I think, and that's part of the gag as well. Didn't sit down and try and write a story about Alpha Centauri or Beetlejuice or something. I went to nonsense cartoon whales with tiny penises and enormous penises and magic vaginas under the waves. So again, with social media and promo and stuff, I have a very kind of nebulous, amorphic kind of. I stoke the fires occasionally and say, hey, wouldn't it be great to pick this up for Christmas right now on Twitter, but I don't do that much. I like talking, as you might have noticed. Yeah. I really like yabbering on. I think that I'll just do for the fun of it, and hopefully people enjoy listening to that and want to find my book as well.
I don't know if you've got another 5-10 minutes to talk about Ask the Nincompoops.
Yeah,
and talk about podcasting.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's quite interesting as well, because
that is interesting. I forgot I did that. I do more than I give myself credit for sometimes. I do less than I'd like, but more than I think.
Because I think I had a quick look. Started in 2018, but you were kind of different to the rest of the world. Pandemic comes along and you stop the podcast, whereas everyone else kind of jumped in.
I always do it bass-ackwards, right? The reason we stopped doing Ask the Nincompoops during pandemic was probably major depression. And also, we used to do Ask the Nincompoops where we'd have kids come into the studio, accompanied obviously by their parents or guardians, and we wouldn't just kidnap kids and bring them in and talk nonsense to them. That would be horrific, not to say verging on illegal. Ask the Nincompoops is a show that me and comedian actress Carrie Quinlan present, where we take questions from kids and they say, why is the sky blue? And we just make up nonsense. We go, oh, well, you see, that's because God ran out of the other crayon, or whatever, Who invented cheese? Oh, that was invented by a farmer in the 15th century and a cow called Darren, whatever. We just riff. But we used to do it with actual kids in the studio, and it wasn't for a long time until we thought, when pandemic came along, we had to shut it down. And then afterwards we thought, well, wouldn't it be easier if we didn't have kids in the studio anyway? And now we just do it where we have questions from the kids, but we don't have to shepherd the kids as well. We should have done that during pandemic. That's what you're telling me. We missed, yet again, I missed a saleable opportunity to double down and produce more episodes. And you're right, I do it backwards. Everything in my life, by the way, I've been told I've done, at school. You run wrong, you do this wrong, you do that wrong. I've made a career out of it, so I don't mind. I again, like, money and success and numbers and ratings are great. Everyone wants them, but they're not what energizes me. It's just whether I think I've done the good work. I'd love all the other stuff on top, but it's gravy. If it comes, then lucky me. I want it to come. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't exercise me.
You've got the book out, so you're kind of publicising it and everything else, but is there already another book in the works? And is
I'm recovering.
Yeah. So as an author now, are you done with ChatGPT? Have you scratched that itch, or?
No, it's not. It's not the new norm, I think. Definitely not. And I'm not an advocate of great, this is how books should be. No, God no. I can't imagine ever wanting to take another deep dive into ChatGPT for the purposes of discussion or fiction or either or both. This was something that happened, but then I can't say I never will. If something came, like, just in the pure abstract, if an idea comes along whether or not it's associated with investigating something in the real world like ChatGPT or something totally fictional. If the idea comes along and takes hold of you, you find that you have no choice. I can't imagine wanting to do anything else with ChatGPT, but for the sake of making an artistic point, if something were to fall into my lap that got my neurons firing, then I would. But no, in all well, that was serious. But in all probability, whatever I do next, I've decided I'd really like to do something very small, very quiet, and very pretty. Because I'd just like to do something that's as opposite as possible to what I've just been through, because I'm not kidding when I say that trying to follow my own creative process and document that, and trying to follow and document ChatGPT's part in that process drove me to the edge of a nervous breakdown. And I'm very proud that it did, because otherwise, like I say, I wouldn't have tried hard enough. But I need to do something very... If this were the 70s and I were a rock band, I'd be saying, we just got to go and get our heads together in the country for a while.
The ethics around all of this. And
yes.
Obviously, your books were... the Mr. Gum books, for example, heavily illustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And you were kind of saying that that's possibly an easier thing for a computer to kind of do. What do you think about the kind of ethics of, whether it's writing stories or illustrations and those kind of things?
I think it's terrible. I think it's terrible that it's going to become an industry norm, right? I don't think it's essentially that different from where culture's been heading increasingly faster for the last X years, right? Since the internet. The internet is a theft machine, essentially, right? It's people take memes. That's the currency, right? That's the currency that the internet trades in. It's memes. You take something from a movie or a picture book or this or that, and you put a new caption on it, you reformat it, right? You show it from a new angle, and you pass it around for free. But the sites that are getting traffic from people trading in memes are monetizing your in-jokes, right? So it's theft at one remove, right? They're entirely happy. Places like Instagram and Reddit and everywhere else is basically really happy for the world to trade in memes. So we all do it at a kind of personal level, which is no worse than sort of saying to your friend, hey, look, your name's Billy, and this place says Billy's Barbers, and I took a photo of it, and I wrote underneath, look, it's your barbershop, Billy. But we do. The maths doesn't work anymore, because everything's stealable, everything's transferable, everything is copyable and remixable. Of course, places like Instagram now have you can remix somebody else's already stolen and remixed content, right? None of that in itself. Well, the fact that mega sites like Meta trade on other people's propensity for being a magpie, that's already pretty unethical. But to bake that further into the culture and say we can now cut out actual human creators, and whereas we might have got an artist to illustrate, or an illustrator or a cartoonist to illustrate this newspaper article, now we don't need to do that. We can just remix it from already extant things and just cut that out, and that's pure profit. Yeah. This is a really worrying development. I think it's different. I think words are more difficult, again, like I say, but that's only a nicety, maybe, right? It's my Mr. Gum books are mashed up into ChatGPT, as you found, because when you asked about Mr. Gum creator, it knew to say things like, oh, you're so anarchic, tell me how you get your, it knows what Mr. Gum is, right?
Yeah.
I don't really mind being a part of the culture, but I mind that the culture thinks that everything is now grist to be remixed rather than produce genuine new work, and to do people out of jobs. I think it's terrifying where that's heading, right? A lot of people will maybe transfer their skills a level up or a level across or a level wherever to become prompt engineers, or to become people who know how to make the AIs work better than the next guy. But again, it's like me being an author and saying, when I started out, I didn't need to be a self-promoter. Why should I, right? If you're a commercial artist, why should you be naturally good at or naturally in favor of transferring your skills to cope with the AI or die,
Yeah.
So no, I think the morals and the ethics of it are extremely precarious, and maybe one way to stem the tide of all of this is to start putting in higher guardrails and watermarks on available property, and making available property unavailable, or making it accounted for.
Yes, it's only going to get the cycle's going to get faster and faster of this kind of stuff. I mean, you talk about the prompt engineers, that was, maybe 6 to 9 months ago, people talking that's going to be the new big job. But then obviously, once people have fed that in, well, that gets sucked into the pipeline.
Yeah, and everything gets mulched down.
You don't need a prompt engineer now because people understand the prompt engineer, and so things are going to just get smaller and smaller.
If you read too much about where IAs are going and where they could go, and you get onto this singularity and this superintelligence and everything, it's very convincing because you can sort of imagine a linear and or an exponential sort of increase in all this, and you can sort of see it happening very quickly in your mind's eye. But our projections of the future are flawed all the time. Even, as you say, when a few months ago we all thought prompt engineering would be the next big thing, and it's not. I think chaos and wrinkles and limitations will occur in the development of all this, and whatever we think the outcome of this technology will be, it ain't necessarily so.
Yeah, I suppose we were all supposed to have jetpacks and hoverboards and all the rest of it, and that never happened.
I know that nothing ever happens in my life that I was expecting, right? If it happens, it happens. If it does happen, it happens in a way I could never have foreseen, that was just sort of demonically interesting, sort of impishly inventive in a way I could never have foreseen it happening. So I do believe in the old-fashioned things of human spirit and soul and shit like that. And I think that, I'm sort of pessimistically optimistic about the future. I think we will find a way to react to and fold AIs into our experience. I think life is bigger than AI. I don't think AI is bigger than life. That may be the most naive thing anyone has ever said on the subject. We'll see.
Thanks to Andy, and thanks for listening. There's more details in the show notes about Andy, the book, and the other areas we discuss in the episode. If you enjoyed this, check out our other episodes where we speak to a range of creatives in other industries about making creativity pay.